Welcome to G Fun Facts Online. Today we're diving into a story where the worlds of politics, media, and the law collided in a spectacular fashion. It's a story about a fight for the truth, one that carried a price tag in the billions and pitted a voting technology company against one of America's most famous political figures. This is the story of how Dominion voting systems took on Rudy Giuliani and the whirlwind of falsehoods that threatened to swallow it whole. In the charged atmosphere following the 2020 U.S. presidential election, a narrative began to form, fueled by the highest levels of power. The election was stolen. This narrative, which came to be known as the Big Lie, needed a villain. That villain became Dominion Voting Systems, a company providing voting hardware and software to 28 states. Leading the charge against Dominion was Rudy Giuliani. Once lauded as America's Mayor Giuliani, in his role as personal attorney to then-President Donald Trump, launched a relentless media campaign. Across television, podcasts, and social media, he spun a web of defamatory attacks. Dominion's 107-page lawsuit, filed in January 2021, meticulously documented over 50 separate instances of these false statements. Giuliani claimed on his podcast that Dominion had stolen the election technologically. On conservative news outlets, he wove a fantastical story about the company being a front for Venezuelan communists, created specifically to rig elections for the deceased dictator, Hugo Chavez. He told one Fox News host that Dominion had tried and true methods for fixing elections. He falsely stated on another show that Dominion employees in Detroit brought in 100,000 fraudulent ballots for Joe Biden. These weren't presented as opinions. They were presented as facts. Giuliani insisted Dominion's software was designed to flip votes, that its machines were easily hackable, and that the company was entangled with corrupt foreign interests. He even conflated two entirely separate companies, falsely claiming on Fox News, "Dominion sends everything to Smartmatic. Can you believe it? Our votes are sent overseas." None of this was true, but the sheer force and repetition of these claims began to convince millions that their democracy had been compromised. The consequences of this viral disinformation campaign were not abstract. They were terrifyingly real and deeply human. The employees of Dominion Voting Systems suddenly found themselves in the crosshairs. As the lies multiplied online, the company's staff became targets of vicious harassment, stalking, and death threats. The company was forced to spend over $500,000 on private security just to protect its people. Employees were told to work from home, to scrub their social media of any identifying information, all out of fear for their own safety and the safety of their families. One of the most chilling examples is the case of Eric Coomer, a Dominion executive. Conspiracy theories falsely identified him as a mastermind in the imaginary plot. This led to a $1 million bounty being placed on his head by angry Trump supporters. Coomer was forced into hiding, his life completely upended by the constant threat of violence. He would later file his own defamation lawsuit, stating, "The widespread dissemination of false conspiracy theories has had devastating consequences both for me personally and for many of the thousands of American election workers." The terror wasn't limited to Dominion's own staff. In Georgia, two election workers, a mother and daughter named Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, became central figures in a vicious conspiracy after Giuliani falsely accused them of processing suitcases of fraudulent ballots. In their own successful defamation case against Giuliani, they gave heart-wrenching testimony about how their lives were destroyed. They endured a flood of racist and violent threats that forced Freeman to flee her home of many years. "I can never move back into the house that I called home," she later said. "I will always have to be careful about where I go and who I choose to share my name with." This brutal intimidation campaign had a ripple effect across the country. A survey by the Brennan Center for Justice revealed that 1/3 of all poll workers felt unsafe at their jobs. The lies weren't just damaging a company. They were eroding the very bedrock of democracy by terrorizing the citizens who make elections possible. Faced with this unprecedented assault, Dominion decided to fight back. In January 2021, they filed a $1.3 billion defamation lawsuit against Rudy Giuliani. The company's CEO, John Poulos, stated their goal clearly: "We must pursue justice to expose how disinformation was maliciously created and purposely spread to deceive the American people." Legally, Dominion faced a huge hurdle. In the United States, public figures suing for defamation must meet a very high standard known as actual malice. This principle, established in the 1964 Supreme Court case New York Times versus Sullivan, means you have to prove the defendant made a false statement, either knowing it was false or with reckless disregard for whether it was true or not. It's a standard designed to protect free speech. Dominion's legal team argued that Giuliani's actions went far beyond protected speech. A key part of their strategy was highlighting a glaring contradiction. While Giuliani was spreading wild conspiracies on TV, in a Pennsylvania courtroom, he was forced to admit that the Trump campaign's legal challenge was not a fraud case. Dominion argued this showed he was unwilling to make these same claims, where he could be sanctioned for lying to a court. To dismantle Giuliani's narrative piece by piece, Dominion presented a mountain of evidence. They pointed to the numerous post-election audits and recounts that consistently confirmed the accuracy of their machines. In Georgia, a complete hand recount of every single paper ballot matched the initial machine count. In Maricopa County, Arizona, a hand audit showed a perfect match with the Dominion machine results. On top of that, the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, part of the Department of Homeland Security, issued a formal statement confirming there was no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes, changed votes, or was in any way compromised. Giuliani's initial response was defiant, calling the lawsuit an act of intimidation. But as the case proceeded, his defense crumbled. His attempts to have the case dismissed failed, and his failure to produce requested evidence during the discovery phase further weakened his position. The Dominion lawsuit wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was part of a cascade of legal and professional consequences for Giuliani. The most public and devastating blow came from the case brought by those Georgia election workers, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. In December 2023, a federal jury, after hearing about the terror they endured, ordered Giuliani to pay them an astonishing $148 million in damages. The verdict was a powerful condemnation of the human cost of his lies. Giuliani later reached a settlement to avoid the forced seizure of his assets, including his Florida condo and prized New York Yankees World Series rings. The legal profession also held him accountable. In June 2021, his law license was suspended in New York after a court found uncontroverted evidence of his demonstrably false and misleading statements. By July 2024, he was officially disbarred in New York, and disbarment in Washington, D.C. followed just 2 months later. A D.C. disciplinary panel wrote simply that Giuliani claimed massive election fraud but had no evidence. As if that wasn't enough, he was also criminally indicted in both Georgia and Arizona for his alleged role in trying to subvert the election. The immense weight of these legal battles led Giuliani to file for bankruptcy in December 2023. The man once celebrated as America's mayor was facing financial and professional ruin, a direct result of his role in promoting the big lie. The case against Giuliani was just one front in a much larger war. Dominion, along with another voting technology company, Smartmatic, launched a coordinated legal strategy to hold not just individuals, but also the powerful media outlets that amplified their lies, accountable. The most famous of these cases was Dominion versus Fox News. In a lawsuit seeking $1.6 billion, Dominion argued the network had knowingly aired false claims about its machines to protect its ratings. The evidence uncovered during discovery was damning. Internal emails and texts showed Fox News hosts and executives privately admitting the claims from Giuliani and others were crazy and nuts, even as they continued to broadcast them to millions. Just as the trial was about to start in April 2023, Fox News settled. They paid Dominion $787.5 million, and publicly acknowledged that certain claims made about the company were false. It was one of the largest defamation settlements in American history, sending a clear message about the immense financial risk of broadcasting known falsehoods. Smartmatic, the company often falsely linked to Dominion in the conspiracies, launched its own lawsuits against Fox News, Newsmax, and One America News, or OAN. It has since reached confidential settlements with both OAN and Newsmax. These lawsuits have demonstrated how defamation law can be a potent weapon against rampant disinformation. While some First Amendment advocates worry about a potential chilling effect on journalism, others see it as a necessary check on a media ecosystem where lies can spread globally in an instant. After more than 4 years, the case of Dominion versus Giuliani finally concluded in late September 2025. The two sides reached a confidential settlement, and the lawsuit was permanently dismissed. While the specific terms remain secret, the resolution marked the end of a long, costly chapter for Dominion. For Giuliani, it was another entry in a long list of consequences. Though it ended without a public trial, the Dominion versus Giuliani case is a landmark. It serves as a stark reminder that while the First Amendment protects speech, it does not protect knowingly false statements that cause massive harm. The case, along with the others against major media networks, has fundamentally altered the calculus of risk for amplifying disinformation. It provided a measure of justice for the people whose lives were turned upside down and reaffirmed that in the end, the truth can be vindicated. The battle against disinformation is far from over, but in this case, truth, armed with the power of the law, struck a decisive blow. Thanks for listening to Fun Facts Online.